Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Friday, the 27th of March, 2026. It's about 10:30 at night. My name is Wes Fryer. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'd like to share with you another video update for Heal Our Culture. I did another one of these about 2 weeks ago, and tonight I'd like to continue this same sort of share and talk about six different things. I want to talk about hope and joy, my sources of hope and joy, a couple of them at least from the last couple of weeks. I want to talk about No Kings 3, which is taking place here in Charlotte tomorrow and all over the United States and promises to be the largest nonviolent civil protest in the history of the United States in 250 years of history. I want to talk a little bit about hard history, Black history, and specifically Wilmington in 1898, which was the only successful coup d'etat of a government in the United States, and it was also the site of a terrible massacre of Black citizens in the United States. Um, I want to talk about some updates for the war on Iran, which is, as I record this, it's been going on a month. I want to share some recommendations for news and a great webinar, which you can check out here in a couple weeks. And then lastly, I want to talk about the possibility and the probability of violence here in our homeland in the United States. So let's get started. First, I want to start with hope and joy. I did this last time, and I think it is so important for us all to remain hopeful and to focus on joy and to remain resilient in this time. And so this is a picture of my dinner last night. We have both of our daughters home for the spring break of the youngest, and we had some friends and nothing, well, not neat. I won't say that. Few things bring me greater joy than being able to, of course, number one, be with family, but number two, being able to cook for family and friends and being able to gather around the table. And it really is so important that we continue to find community and build community in this time and not be overwhelmed by the news feed and by a lot of polarizing stuff that's happening. So I hope you are finding hope and joy, and I hope you are making that a priority in your life because we've just got to. We have to take care of ourselves. And if we don't do that, we can't really do much else. Let's talk about No Kings 3. So, tomorrow, as I record this, it'll be Saturday, March the 28th, 2026, and this will be the third No Kings nationwide rally in the United States. Since last summer, I have been active in the organization Indivisible and in our Charlotte Indivisible branch. I actually had an opportunity to speak from the stage at the first No Kings rally here in Charlotte. And then after that, I joined the social media team and I've been active in helping Indivisible get a podcast set up, get active on Substack, and I've been live streaming different events. I had a chance to live stream No Kings 2. We live streamed a protest and march called Ice Out for Good after the killing of Renee Good and Alex Peretti in Minneapolis. I also live streamed the Martin Luther King Jr. parade that took place here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So tomorrow we'll be live streaming. I will be live streaming on YouTube again, but also on our Instagram. And then we've got another volunteer who's going to be live streaming on TikTok. I hope that you will go in person to the No Kings rallies and protests. There are a lot of folks still, like, I don't know, 30 to 40%, according to surveys, of citizens here in the United States that are happy with what is going on in our government. They're happy with what has happened with ICE, with a culture of fear, the fact that we're spending $20 billion in this country to basically create what are called detention facilities or detention camps, but effectively are concentration camps. And of course, there's a lot of distraction from this right now, and it's an important thing to focus on. It's a war. It's another war going on because we have war in the Middle East, we have war in Ukraine, and now we have war in Iran, which the United States, for the record, was not provoked in launching. Um, it's just terrible. And so I believe that we have and need to maintain a representative government with checks and balances in the United States. We have not suffered kings here in the United States for 250 years, and we should not have any kings today. And that is unfortunately the way our chief executive is acting, like he's a king. And I hope that we're able to have elections, midterm elections coming up and presidential elections in 2028. There's just a lot of bad stuff going on, but we cannot give up. And it is so important to know that we still have many institutions and opportunities to share our voice, to make our opinions known peacefully and in organized resistance. And this No Kings rally is an opportunity to do that. Now, the work of supporting democracy and supporting candidates and trying to end gerrymandering, both political and racial gerrymandering. All of that work doesn't happen at a rally, but we certainly do have an opportunity to amplify the voices of many organizations, and you can see many of them listed here, which you can find at nokingclt.com. We need to continue to build coalitions, and I'm so proud of the coalition which the leaders of Indivisible Charlotte have built through the events that happened in November of last year when ICE came to Charlotte and terrorized our city, seized people off of the street, seized citizens. There were some people without immigration documentation that were seized and deported. But there were all kinds of folks who were just grabbed, and these were masked agents that did not, to date, bear any accountability for their actions, which were illegal, which were contrary to the Constitution of the United States and the due process laws, which, we not only have rights to as citizens, but there are due process laws that anybody in the United States has under the law. So, No Kings 3, it happens tomorrow. And if you, for some reason, can't go, you can view the live streams on multiple channels at our indivisibleclt.org website. Those links are there right now. Let's talk about hard history. One of the important parts of healing our culture is studying history and recognizing the truth, what happened. And in 1898, in Wilmington, North Carolina, there was a successful coup d'etat. The fusion government, which was a coalition at the time between the Republicans and a populist party that had sprung up, were able to defeat, at that time, the Democratic Party, which was the white supremacist party that was the carryover from the Confederacy, and they were able to be elected to multiple offices. But there was an uprising, and not only was there a transfer of power at gunpoint in Wilmington, but there was also a massacre of African American citizens in Wilmington and a mass exodus, and it was a horrific, horrific incident in American history that has not been shared widely, and many people do not know about Wilmington in 1898. Now, my wife and I moved from Oklahoma almost 4 years ago. When I was in Oklahoma, I learned about the Tulsa massacre. Now, both of these have been called a race riot, but in each case, and I think Tulsa occurred in 1921, these were massacres of African Americans by white Americans. And these incidents are not only important to study because we need to know the truth, I think it also points to how the struggles that we are having today in the United States are a continuing struggle that we have had for centuries in our country against forces that would seek to limit the opportunity for full participation in the democratic process, and individuals that do not believe in universal human rights, that every human being, as a fact of their humanity, deserves and is accorded under international law full rights. That is irrespective of ethnicity, national origin, gender, any of those kinds of things. So there's an American Experience documentary that I would recommend to you. It came out in November, I think, November of 2024. It's called American Coup, Wilmington, 1898. You can view this for free on YouTube. But then I'm also going to point you to a wonderful podcast episode that my friend David Harris just posted on his podcast called The Teacher's Forum. And it is an interview with Guy Hill, who is a North Carolina teacher. And you can find his website at theteachersforum.buzzsprout.com. But in addition, I really do think that learning about Black history, which is our history, it's the history of the world, it's the history of the United States, is so important. And a friend, Crystal Marie, who I go to church with, has a wonderful website and podcast called UnderTold, and you can find that at undertoldbycm.com. And I just listened to her third episode, which talks about the Black Panthers and the ways in which the Panthers were involved in feeding people and specifically children breakfast at school, and the way that Edgar Hoover and the FBI uh, targeted them and actually saw that free lunch, no, it wasn't free lunch, it was free breakfast, but the feeding of literally thousands and thousands of Americans, and not only Black Americans, but mainly Black Americans, but other Americans who needed the food. Um, how they were targeted by the FBI, and just a pretty despicable chapter of history. So I have actually put links to all of this, the Wilmington documentary from American Experience, and the Teachers Forum, as well as Undertold by Crystal Marie, on my Black History page, which is on my Follow Jesus website. So you can find that at followjesus.westfire.com/Black History. And I'll probably try to say this every episode, but Heal Our Culture is not a faith-based, and it's certainly not an exclusively Christian movement. I believe all of us have the capacity to be culture healers, not culture warriors. And as a follower of Jesus, I do profess that, and I don't hide that. There are a lot of different resources that I share. And so these are not explicitly Christian resources, but they are Black history resources. And as a follower of Christ and someone who aspires to be a caring human being, I think it's really important to learn about these topics. And I'm really thankful to both David Harris and Crystal Marie for these podcasts. I want to amplify them, give them a shout out, and encourage you to give them a listen and share them with others as well. Let's talk about the Iran war. So we have been in the midst of March Madness, and I'm honestly not a huge sports fan. I like tailgating, I like getting together with my family, but I'm not a sports nut. But the real March Madness I wrote about on my Resist and Heal Substack a couple weeks ago, and the real March Madness is this dehumanization that continues to take place in our country, the othering of people, and this is including folks in Iran by the leaders of our country, and by so many in parts of the media, both in mainstream media and social media as well. So I'm going to encourage you to visit these links. I will try to include these direct links in the description of this video, both on YouTube and on Substack, and then also on Facebook, where I'm going to share this. And I just think that we need to recognize universal humanity, universal human rights, and the evil which is perpetuated and continues to be perpetuated when people will support the lie that there are some humans who are more deserving of rights than others. So, in addition to posts on Resist and Heal, you can also see notes that I make to articles. And I'm going to go ahead and give this one a shout out. When you are on Substack, and I'll talk a little bit more about Substack here in a second, um, for folks who have turned on this feature, in addition to a homepage, in some cases you have a podcast, you've got an about page, but you have a notes page. And so this is what I actually shared, I guess, yesterday on my Resist and Heal. And I'm going to go ahead and just read this to you. And this was my response to Gedry's newsletter, and this was an article called the Sharpie, the Sizzle Reel, and the War. I said, detailed on-point summary and analysis of the dumpster fire today, which was a White House foreign policy and Iran war status press briefing. Tragic and embarrassing, horrific and scary. The birds have truly come home to roost. U.S. citizens have elected an incompetent and entirely immoral felon as our chief executive, and now the world reaps the whirlwind, while Saudi Arabia and the military contractors cash in. May the good Lord deliver us quickly from this unbearable nightmare of our own electoral making. All the while, our elected representatives in Congress cannot find a compromise to fund TSA. At least Democratic leaders in the Senate are acting to slow the construction of ICE concentration camps across our nation. I pray God will use us all to not just end the nightmarish rule of this present administration, but deeply heal our culture for the generations who follow us to our graves. I'd never imagined I'd witness such graft, immoral leadership, and doddering diplomacy as we are now forced to endure. We can and must do so much better as a nation and a community. And so that was my comment. And then it's for those of us that are Twitter users, it's like a retweet. It's called a restack on Substack. And so you can click this link from my post and you can see what Mary Gedry wrote on March 26th. The Sharpie, the Sizzle, Reel, and the War. And her subtitle was Trump's cabinet meeting was supposed to project strength that looked like a presidency running on propaganda, grievance, and a man who may be losing his ability to hide what's happening in plain sight. So this was an excellent summary of, folks, just absolutely terrible things that are happening. Um, our chief executive is not fit to hold office. And it is very evident when you watch video and you read analysis like this of his mind and what is happening with his mind. And of course, he is our commander in chief. And I pray that this nightmare can end soon, peacefully. Okay. The last thing I want to say, I think maybe I have another thing. I want to recommend this to you. Now, Angry Planet is one of my favorite podcasts, and it's actually one of the few that I do pay for to support. And Matthew Galt posted this as a paid update. So this is from March 20th, 2026, but it's called Neutralizing Iran's Nuclear Arsenal. And it's an interview with Franz Diaz Marin, and he is the editor for nuclear affairs at the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. And so this really explained how uninformed it is to think that we're just going to bomb Iran into a situation that is going to guarantee they do not have fissionable, nuclear weapons grade uranium or other materials, because it relies upon inspection and international advisors and inspectors being able to be on site. It's just a very good article, and it shows how you're not just going to be able to bomb your way to quote victory in Iran. This is a link on the bulletin to the article that Francois Diaz Marin wrote, actually on March 9th, called Trump May Send U.S. Troops to Neutralize Iran's Highly Enriched Uranium. There are no good options. And I think it's important for us to be aware of what's happening. And these are some of the voices that I'm listening to try to stay aware of and to try better understand what's happening. And then to be able to advocate for change. Let's talk lastly about news recommendations. I'm going to recommend to you, if you're not already, that you get on Substack. Now, I want to also acknowledge that there are a lot of different folks on Substack, and one of the things that a number of people I respect have pointed out is that Substack does continue to host and not unplatform some white supremacists, some Nazis. And I need to follow up and see what is happening with that. I haven't followed up on that in a few weeks. But Substack is now one of my most important sources of news. And there are many independent journalists and other individuals, citizens like myself, who are writing on Substack, sharing news and links, and providing an excellent opportunity to be able to curate and reclaim our news feeds. Rather than just watching TV, we can curate with intention our news feed. So this is a link at the bottom to a Media Education Lab webinar that I hosted a couple months ago on Substack 101, which just kind of gives you some basics of how to use Substack. I want to also recommend to you a news source that I have just started to use in the last month, and it's called Verity News, and the website is just verity.news. And this is actually going to be the topic of the Media Education Lab webinar that I will be hosting in 2 weeks. Now, Max Tegmark is at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he has done, along with others, research into polarization and the ways in which we might be able to find news sources that can help address polarization. I really like the way that Verity will take the news sources that are the mainstream media news sources that are covering a topic And when you visit it, in fact, maybe we should go to it. Here, let's just go to it really quick. Um, so when we find an article, this one, okay, Department of Justice admits error in ICE immigration court arrest justification. The article here splits the sources on the left, center, and the right. They're covering it, but also it indicates in a y-axis if it's a pro-establishment center or establishment critical source. It goes through the facts that all of these news sources agree on, and then it shows basically the bias or the spin, the narrative from the left, the narrative from the right. In some cases, it'll talk about either a pro-establishment or a critical of the establishment perspective. There'll be some related articles. You can link to the public figures that are mentioned. On some of these, it'll also say what the prediction markets are saying about that particular topic. But I really like it, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it. Speaking of, on Monday, April 6th, 2026, you can go to the website mediaeducationlab.com, click events, and you'll see this. The session is called AI News and Education, Who's Building Our News Platforms? And there are going to be some representatives of Verity. We're going to talk about their platform. They ingest thousands of different sources, and they use humans to vet those, and then they put together these articles, and it's completely free. And there's a nonprofit called Improving the News that is the sponsor behind it. And we're going to talk about this, interrogate it, and hopefully emerge more educated about other options that we have as we seek to reclaim our news feeds and curate with intention our news feeds. So, on that topic, I mentioned this last time, I might mention it every week. I have vibe coded a website that you can find at news.westfryer.com, and that simply takes all of the newsletter links that I subscribe to with email and it puts them into a web page that you can just browse. It updates every 30 minutes, and I am using that frequently, usually every day, to get some of my news, and it's open and free, and you can use that as well. There's no advertisements or tracking or anything like that on this site. The last thing I want to talk about is the potential for violence here in our homeland. If you are not following this person, this is Timothy Snyder. He has moved to Canada. He is um, a very, very wise voice when it comes to authoritarianism and tyranny and fascism. And on March the 8th, he wrote this article called The Desire for Terror and the Defense of Democracy. And this article points out that the playbook of fascism will utilize of incidents of violence in many cases to seize more power, to limit rights, and to basically consolidate power. And if we think that not only the war in Gaza and our support of the state of Israel will be without consequence here in the United States, but in addition, the bombing and destruction, the death and killing of so many in Iran and in the Middle East is going to be without consequence here, I think we're being very, very naive. And so I hope I'm wrong. I hope Timothy Snyder is wrong. But I think that it is important for us to psychologically prepare and steel ourselves for the strong likelihood that we are going to see additional violence beyond the ICE and Customs and Border Patrol killing of Renee Good and Alex Peretti in Minneapolis, Minnesota, um, earlier this past year. um, I think we're going to see more violence. And so I want to recommend Tim Snyder to you as a source. And then I also want to encourage you to think about this because I did not live through the 1960s. I was born in 1970. And as I learned about the civil rights movement and the violence which accompanied the civil rights movement, I was very thankful that I didn't live through that time and that very difficult time. But I believe we are living into a time today that is equally fraught, not only with polarization and with political animus, but also with violence. And we have seen examples of this. I don't have a slide for this, but we actually just had a Republican candidate here in Mecklenburg County who had gunshots fired at his house and his vehicle. And this was just 2 days ago or yesterday, he announced that with his family he's leaving. He wasn't killed, he wasn't hit, he wasn't, none of his family were hurt, but his home and his property was shot at, and he's now leaving his home. And because he's moving out of that county, he can't run for that office. And this is tragic. And I think that we need to steel ourselves as best that we can psychologically for this, and then we need to think about the ways that we can try to protect ourselves and our families, but also not be seized with terror and fear, but remain hopeful and strong in the face of a very, very difficult situation. So, the last bit of advice I have here is to listen to Adam Kinzinger. I follow Adam also on Substack. That's where I follow Timothy Snyder as well. And today he wrote or published this article called The Open Hangar Problem: America is Not Ready for the War That's Coming. And the photo there is of drones, because one of the things he talks about a lot in this article is the way in which drone warfare has dramatically changed the face of warfare in Ukraine. It has changed it in Iraq, and it is going to change it for the foreseeable future. There's a lot I could say about this, and I need to wrap up because I think my daughter wants to go to bed and I'm in her room. This is also my office. But yeah, I think that, again, we need to prepare for what is coming. And we also need to be advocating for leadership that is going to prepare us for the realities that we face. And Kinzinger is a good voice for that. So I want to encourage you to join me in advocacy. I believe we should all build community, both online and in person. We need to share trusted voices, and that's part of what I try to do here in these Heal Our Culture updates. We need to heal personally from the wounds that we have suffered. Um, and then we need to resist cooperatively. And the reason I believe we should resist is so that we can strive to heal our culture, and we can be culture healers, not culture warriors. My name's Wes Fryer. You can find links to the spaces where I update about advocacy for human rights, representative democracy, the rule of law, separation of church and state, these values that I hold dear, at wesfryer.com/advocacy. Until next time, I encourage you to keep the light on. Stay hopeful, find ways to fill your mind with joy, but let's also stay appraised and up to date on things that are happening, and let's find ways to collaborate together to resist these forces of darkness that have descended upon our country and our world, and let's continue to work together to move towards the light. Take care.